Blessings and welcome everyone. Still pretty hot as I'm recording this video. This is another video from the vault, and I am talking all about OCD, pure O. And to a certain degree, this can apply to any anxiety disorders or maybe even a co-occurring anxiety disorder with, say, ADHD, where involuntary intrusive thoughts exist because of a physical or mechanical issue in the brain. Now, I remember making this video because I had just moved, as you can tell, still unpacking, at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And I made this video because I was observing how a lot of teachings that have kind of blown through the zeitgeist, right, especially in a lot of New Age and personal development circles, do not serve people who live with these kinds of challenges very well. And I wanted to talk about how I was able to push through them. Because when it comes to intrusive thoughts that are a mechanical issue, it's not something that goes away with a focus on, say, a core belief. It is not a spiritual issue. It is not something that is about reliving a trauma or anything along those lines. When it comes to OCD and pure O, or any kind of intrusive thoughts where they are involuntary like that, they are non-emotional like that, it's, again, a nervous system issue, it's an electrical issue, as I like to talk about it, there has to be a new approach and philosophy for this as we go through this as spiritual practitioners, while still, of course, keeping an eye on things, right? We all have things that we do, make sure that we master, and so this is my way of sharing how I've come through a lot of that, as well as also talk about what's going on in the brain. So the first half of the talk is more about how to approach your spiritual practice, right? Because if you are psychic and you do have all of this going on, and a lot of these teachings are kind of messing with your head, it can be really hard to get a stable ground to start developing your work with. And then the second half of the video, I talk about what is going on with the brain to clear up any confusion for anyone who may have some concerns or some thoughts about what's going on, maybe with themselves or with a loved one who may have OCD or pure O, or maybe, again, even this could serve people with ADHD coupled with an anxiety disorder to a certain degree. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Let me know what you think in the down bar below. That it's a hardware issue. And when we say hardware issue, we're talking about the physical function of the brain, not so much a software issue. And one of the things that I've encountered, going through forums, going through discussions and things like that over the years, is that not a lot of spiritual teachers and not a lot of spiritual groups just know how to actually talk about what's going on in a person with anxiety or OCD's head. Think positive, happy thoughts, all those kinds of things. The problem with that is that it's not about belief. It's not about that. You're literally you're coping with a faulty alarm system. Clinically, is that the difference between these intrusive thoughts and hallucinations is the OCD person, the anxious person, has insight. Which basically means they can tell it's not real. They know it's not real. They're not even thinking it. It's literally an alarm system going off in their head. But your alarm system might not sound like a beep, beep, beep. Your alarm system may sound like a phrase, but it's a phrase that's locked into your head. With OCD, it's easy to find out what that is and notice it when it comes on because, luckily, your brain has somehow memorized a recording of that similar thought. A lot of the times, that has to do with, say, contamination, threats, things like that. That's the sound of the OCD. And so what you've got to pay attention to is when that is actually happening and learn how to say, that's just an alarm. I don't know what my alarm's going off about. There's something happening. Maybe I've got a headache. Maybe I didn't get much sleep last night. Maybe this person's really stressing me out and this is my body, my energy telling me this person's stressing you out, this person's draining you, this person's frustrating you, this person's, threatening you, making you uncomfortable. So you've got to be able to understand where that alarm system comes into play. How do I turn off this alarm? It's really starting to be distracting. It's really, it's revving me up, it's stressing me out. Oh, I'm getting very tense. my nerves are shot. If I thought this cup of coffee in my hand, let's say I was reading an article online, or I saw something, or I was just getting stressed out, whatever, and then my brain decided to do its usual alarm system thing. And now all of a sudden it was, this coffee is contaminated. It's got Ebola, 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 Ebola. Add that to the next list of scary. Some of the teachings of, say, spiritual practice get in there. There would be a part of me that would think, I thought about it so much. I probably thought about it for a good 2 minutes while holding this. All that energy, even if it's not infected with Ebola, I just created a Ebola magnet potion. You know, if I drink this cup of coffee, it's going to manifest Ebola somewhere in my life. That is a scary thing to play around with, especially if you are a part of this and this is a part of your spiritual practice, right? So, one of the things that you've got to do is first, you've got to realize that unless you're consciously putting your intent and your energy and your focus into it, you're not going to manifest jack shit. It's the same reason a lot of people who think happy thoughts don't actually get their wishes made. You know, there's no actual energy, intention, and focus and exercise going into it. So, your thoughts aren't doing anything. Your thoughts are safe inside your head. And that is something that working on as an exercise, interestingly enough for me, has made a big difference. My thoughts aren't doing anything. I'm doing. My thoughts are not doing. My thoughts are safe inside my head. Think of it like a steel trap. It's not getting out. It's not going anywhere. It'll be over. It'll be over soon enough. You know, that anxiety moment, that OCD moment, you know, depending on what kind of day you have, it can go on for, 10 minutes, it can go on for 2 hours. So you need to be able to allow yourself to be like, look, my thoughts are safe inside my head. For those of you who are spiritual practitioners, the only thing I would say is that you need to remember there is no such thing as a spell you can't break. And while that does not mean go and sage your house 20 times a day, throw out all your stuff, that is going to make your OCD worse. What you need to remember is that you are, going to change your vibration anyway when you feel better. Everything's going to change when you feel better. You probably already do have some kind of ritual work that you do, meditation work that you do. Let it take care of it then. Instead of going like, oh shit, it's the Ebola coffee. Oh no! What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be like, if this does make me think crazy thoughts, and again, it's not a hallucination, it's just sort of like a loudspeaker, because I don't believe them. This, to me, I'm not calling this intuition, I'm not calling this psychic ability. The same thought, it's on recording. You've got to learn to notice that. Then you can bring it down, take a breath, do some mindfulness work, or just let it go. Watch your thoughts and just be like, wow, it's going nuts. And you will start to come down. You will start to feel those stress hormones come down. And if you're worried about manifesting something because you had that thought or you concentrated on it for a while and, you've kind of bought into the idea that thoughts manifest your reality all by themselves, first, they don't. And you're going to train yourself. You're going to train your brain to react physically differently, So, just some thoughts on that for this little intro. Let's talk about the nature versus nurture discussion. And this does tend to speak to a lot of anxiety disorders across the board. In particular, ones that are more nature, again, than nurture. Nature is more about, okay, it's mechanical, it's in the head, it's more of that physical issue that could come from a genetic predisposition, and they're finding out more and more when it comes to things like OCD and anxiety that just happens to be the case. Now, if you have a genetic predisposition, or you have a long family history of anxiety disorders, there's no guarantee that it's actually going to switch on. That is where we have the nurture element come in. It's really more like 75% nature, 25% nurture, as opposed to, say, the flip, which would be more like a personality disorder, some mood disorders, or even, say, PTSD, where it's almost more like 75% nurture, 25% nature. So, what is going on in the mechanical structure or the mechanics of OCD and a lot of anxiety disorders, especially the ones, again, that have to do with intrusive thought. With people with anxiety disorders, OCD, and intrusive thoughts, there are a couple of things that are not firing correctly. In particular, they are noticing a marked reduction in how much serotonin is in that person at any given time. Does that mean we're not happy? No. Does that mean that we're perpetually angry or sad or depressed? No, absolutely not. Another thing that they're starting to understand is that the part of the brain that releases endorphins, okay, that sense of relief, that rush of relief that you get after solving a problem, after tackling a big issue, that little reward, kind of like a dopamine reward, but endorphins, again, they do more than just that. In a person with OCD, or somebody who has proclivity towards intrusive thoughts and anxiety disorders and things like that, that may not happen. And those endorphins may not come. And in severe cases, or in harder parts of their life, or areas where, in times of their life where that takes a stronger hold, they may not even get that endorphin rush from, self-rewarding behavior. And luckily there's a way to start training that again. But again, it's a mechanical issue. It's not rooted in a core belief. OCD, in particular, but also some anxiety disorders, tend to show up at different points. They tend to manifest or take their hold at different points in life. It's not just all across the board. A person doesn't just wake up at 50 and suddenly have OCD. And it usually happens a lot earlier than that. When we look at, say, when can we notice these things? There's childhood, in particular between the ages of 6 and 12. And then there's also young adulthood, especially, as we get into, say, our mid-20s. Those seem to be the times where if it's going to get there and stick, it's going to be there. Now, OCD itself tends to happen more to boys than girls, especially at younger ages. Women who have OCD tend to have a lot of that take its strongest hold, again, after college, after university years, you go into that mid-20s time. A lot of the time, it can be, this can be switched over due to routine or constant and ongoing stress or instability. Yes, possibly trauma. And what's happening is, it's not a belief. It's not a person trying to go back and relive an experience. The brain physically is having an adaptation to what is going on around them. The child or the young adult is basically... There was never a point in time where either A, they had reassurance from the environment, not necessarily always from, say, like, oh, good boy, good girl, or it's okay, but there was never really any reassurance that there would be peace, so the brain doesn't know what's going on. The brain is thinking, okay, well, we're constantly in migration, we're in a harsh environment, there's a volcano exploding every minute, or a brush fire, or something along those lines. Sometimes it can also come when a person's environment conditions them never to expect a consistent period of calm. If you had endorphins releasing, or a lot of serotonin given at one time, or you're sitting there in a puffy pink cloud, and this was, we were living back in the bush, you would probably be killed by that fire. So the brain is just simply adapting to a much harsher, much more insane kind of environment. The sun never came back up, even just in what you were witnessing. So it can be, again, this is where we have the mistake of trying to equate it to PTSD, because a lot of people with OCD don't have the symptoms of reliving and emotional triggers and regression. That's not the same thing. When you see that going on, pay attention to yourself, your environment, and or to somebody who may be having that going on. There is a way to train or catch it early when it comes to younger people, especially, again, we're looking at that 6 to 12 area. There is a chance to kind of stop that and turn it around, where, if you notice, okay, my child is washing their hands constantly, or toothbrushing is another thing that's very big. Brushing, self-grooming over and over again. It's not a self-soothing. I guess in a sense it is. In a sense it can be considered a self-soothing at that age, but there's also, again, sort of a way, they're trying to turn off an alarm that turned off for everyone else in the house. Now, why is that alarm still on? That, again, has to go into the mechanics. What we could do is, if you catch it early, help find a way to get that situation caught and calmed down. It's okay. The storm has cleared. Because when it comes to OCD and anxiety,
it doesn't really feel like that storm has cleared. Again, the sun just doesn't come up after going down. And that is what kind of trains the brain to become what it is. One of the things I would say that needs to be paid attention to when it comes to OCD and anxiety is that people are always trying to cure it. And when you're trying to cure it and fight it, again, you are actually just creating a new ritual out of it. So if you are trying to help somebody who has it, and you're just like, do this, take this, find something to get obsessive about, is what you're actually saying. I know plenty of people with OCD and anxiety disorders who obsess over their diets, who obsess over supplementation. So that's not the way to help people out. Because again, you are dealing with a situation where the biggest problem is the ritual in the first place. Now the reason the ritual is the issue is because the ritual reinforces that there is a problem in the brain. Okay, and again, it's not a belief, it's actually about chemicals. It's about what the brain is doing. Sometimes a person will wash their hands over and over and over again just to get a little bit of that endorphin hit. They don't feel better. Or they'll brush their teeth. Or they'll do the checking, and they'll tap the stove a million times to see if the heater's still on. They'll flick the lights. They'll do all those things. They'll make themselves late for work. Check the lock on the door. Trying to find that sense of relief. How do we know the problem, solve the problem's over? So if you have a sibling or a parent or a child who's kind of going through this, it's kind of helping them know that the problem's over. Or helping them know that, what you've done is sufficient. You're good. That's what you need to do. If you want to go through it in more of a behavioral emotional support way, which, emotional support is a big deal, you could help them to kind of learn when enough is enough. Trying to make it all stop, trying to yell at them, trying to compare it to something else. Oh, this isn't a big deal, and a lot of that can happen with kids and young adults as well, because you sort of develop, I must be so selfish, because I don't have this going on. Or, there's somebody who's clearly got something worse in my family that needs, that needs this to happen, so I'll just maintain over here, don't worry, my rituals will I'll self-soothe with that. You don't want to go down that road. But what happens is, again, fundamentally, not in a belief, but physically, the brain is still searching for that endorphin, searching for that perfect switch to get the endorphins going, that perfect switch to kind of get that serotonin back that it already has so low. So it's not, again, it's kind of hard to do the nurture when it is a lot of nature, but, what little is there can help. Preventing it is not necessarily an easy thing to do. It's not something that you can really prevent. It's almost more like you've got to catch it and then correct it before it happens, without being, without making it an issue for yourself or your spouse or your child or whoever has it, without actually turning it into just, a bigger threat. And that can make things hard. Again, it's not about a pervasive belief. It's actually about being exposed to a physically safe, and an ongoing, functional space, wholesome space, and sort of letting yourself settle into that, and also allowing your brain to adapt to that new environment, instead of routinely being exposed to people and situations where it's always dysfunction, or it's always out of control, or having your brain do it to you, even when you're in the privacy of your own home. So that is what I gotta say about that. I hope you all found this video helpful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will be back soon.